Nirmal Kulkarni ma'am and our advisor NASA India, Sabri sir. So, sir has been the moderator for GSEN Trophy since the last 3 years. So it's for the first time that a moderator for a certain ANC trophy is having interactive session with the students. So, sir, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, NASA, for inviting me over here. And thank you guys for coming and being here. At least I have some audience now. So, can you hear?
Yes, sir.
Can all the people back there hear also?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the talk is titled Gaps and Gaping Holes. So, between any particular understanding that we have of any subject, I have come across the fact that there are several gaps, and in some places there are gaping holes between what we actually want and what actually is as a reality which you get outside the world. So a bit of talk about that, because GSEN mostly being on the NASA platform in the co-curricular activities. In the curricular activities, basically there is no sense of realism. So the question which arises in the mind is that what does an architect do? Or what is an architect trained to do in these 5 years of their course? And one thing for sure is that he's trained to kind of put up a building, like you guys said that there's a library, so you need to put up a library. There's a hotel. You're given a certain time frame in that you have to design a hotel and think about how to kind of get it constructed, not actuality, but in virtual reality. How to get it constructed, because you do the 3Ds, you do work with SketchUp, and you do work with a lot of things. So you need to know how to kind of put up a space which can be passed off as the typology of a hotel or the typology of any other kind of building. So that is for sure that you do. Then obviously you deal with the materials part of it, because there's very much a part. There are bricks, there is concrete, and there are so many other new materials which have come into the market recently. So you deal with the materials, you deal with the technology of how to put those materials together. So that is another thing for sure that you do. And I'm talking about these things basically because as I've found that the more and more you do this, one keeps on losing a kind of specificity as to exactly what does an architect do. Because for a single library, if there are going to be in a class 40 kinds of designs, then which would be really the design which actually materializes in the outside world? There are so many ifs, buts, and kind of things which we don't really know. There are so many influences which kind of the design gets onto the whole thing. So along with this whole thing, like I was talking to you about the lipstick in architecture, the aesthetics part of it, and if you only consider it to be a lipstick kind of thing where we have a kind of a plan, so you generate a plan, and then you have the sections and elevations, and you imagine the kind of space, and then you start doing the elevations on that. That is, if you do a building in that sense, then it becomes a kind of a space which can have then any kind of elevation actually. It could have 40 different kind of elevations in the classroom. The design could remain the same. The space could remain the same. But that's not really the way things kind of turn out to be. So there is the aesthetic involvement, and then a part which is kind of left off, which is why I'm calling this gaps or gaping holes, is the social part. The social part, I'm right now not talking about social part in terms of the people divide, but even the buildings which you design in the college, you are designing an object actually in the ultimate sense. But how would the person experience that object? How many of you have actually looked that whole aspect, because that is where we need that, relationship of the person to the building. Because ultimately, architecture and architecture students are supposed to house people in any kind of a function. The function remains a kind of a typology, but the reason actually is always the people. But as I have found currently, that there is a huge amount of rush, like somebody said over here about the images in on the net, the beautiful images which come from all the Western world, and we easily consume them because they are so exciting, so beautiful looking, and we kind of attach ourselves to those images. So in this thing, we want to find out, particularly through the GSEN trophy, as to how we can kind of go through these gaps, find out where are the gaping holes within our architecture courses, within our architecture studies. This is the only opportunity really that you will get to engage with something which is co-curricular and trying to find out a gap which is there in your course or within your course structure. So one thing is for sure, that the architect generate very good ideas, and it's only ideas which kind of attract the architect to whatever he or she is doing. So we will remain in the realm of ideas for this time, for the time being, and see how through ideas we can discover some relevant social themes through the medium of GSEN and through the medium of NASA. Now, if you see over here, the title also says the urban condition. Now, today, it is very much important that we also look at the city and not only the building that we are designing in the city. If it's a library building, we always have to see how it relates to the city in general, and of course to its immediate surroundings in particular. So there are so many aspects that we actually study, and this is the complete layered process that we have. So it's called the urban condition. But when we run a reality check on the urban condition, there are so many aspects which we find which we have not even touched in the courses at all, and it's very difficult to see that what are we doing for those particular things which we haven't touched, which are more like gaping holes, not only gaps. Okay, is that clear until now? Actually has been put to me earlier also, is that why should students of architecture, particularly in the second and third years, because second and third years are the ones who actually engage with NASA, the fourth years and fifth years are too busy to do their own work. Why should they engage with the city? And this is a question which actually is quite interesting, because to answer that question, we need to see actually what is happening in the city, which we will see in the slides in the further session of this presentation. So the rationale, as one were to kind of call it, I feel, and as I have realized after talking with you a little bit, that we are all definitely mesmerized by the object or the iconic object. And that is very much natural, because if you put something really of that beauty and that worth in front of you, you are definitely going to see that thing and you're going to get excited with that. And maybe a lot of people over here might have also joined architecture because of that kind of fascination for creating beautiful buildings, fascination for creating wonderful spaces, fascination for creating, kind of dealing with lighting conditions, materials, those kind of things. So a lot of people have come over here because of that. But the aspect which we keep on forgetting is the humans. Where are the humans? And particularly in India, there are various kinds of humans. We are one particular kind of humans, which are architects, and I don't know, are we humans? So this particular presentation is only going to be about raising a lot of questions, because what I want you to go back with is a lot of questions. Because those questions are something which only you can answer. Every individual can answer that question for himself or for herself. But there are no written answers for this anywhere in any guidelines, anywhere in any guidebooks. There is nothing over here. Okay? These are all questions which you have to answer yourself. So there is something of a drastic human condition which is happening in your city. Every person over here, whether they've come from Punjab, whether they've come from Dehradun, or whether they've come from Noida, of course that is NCR, whether they've come from Jodhpur or anywhere, will definitely see a kind of a dichotomy in their city in terms of the way that people live. Is that right? So the only thing which happens is that we don't really engage with trying to provide the means and needs to the other part of the city, which is actually a much more dense part. If you see the statistics, you'll probably find that 60% to 70% of your city would be living in the slums or in informal settlements, as they call them. Is that also correct, or this is not a correct thing? I'd like to know from you guys. Is that correct? How can we do something for this? Now the rationale also for that is, anybody will ask the question, why should I do something for them? It is for the government to do. I mean, why the hell should I've come to an architecture college, I want to design a beautiful building, I want to design an iconic building, I want to be like, Herzog du Moron or whatever it is, and I want to really be like Renfulas, and those are the kind of buildings I want to build. I want to build a Shanghai, I want to make a Singapore. I mean, all these smart cities and all these things, whatever has been floated around, they're all based on the concept of Singapore and on the concept of other things. But are we questioning them? The main point over here is that we need to question whether Singapore is a desirable condition for us. That is the question that you should go back with when you finish this, when I'm through with the presentation and after your question and answer series. That's the most important question that you really need to do. So what is the need? I really sincerely believe, and I feel and I see it every day, everywhere, that we have lost touch with the people. We are not really designing anything for the people. I mean, let's be honest about it. We are actually designing it because we are interested, kind of a neurotic interest in designing a fantastic building. And this is what is actually bothering, because then the questions of the people never get addressed. And then if we don't engage with that at some point, and now I'm going to try and create a rationale for as to why we should engage with the other people as well, and with all the people, and how we are kind of trying to find a connection. So the question here is, can architecture be a means of connecting? That's it. So you should go back with this question in mind, and I'll try to project as to how we can, think in terms of analogies. And over here you can see that the brain, within one brain, there are so many of these nerve centers. And these nerve centers are connected by a very coordinated network of what is known as connectomes. Now, taking this analogy one step ahead, I would like to say that the connectomes in one brain is one part of the story. But, a lot of times I feel that empathy flows from the connection between all of us together also. In one hall, in one city, in one country, when there is a slogan of nationality being raised, everybody forgets everything else and becomes an Indian. That becomes the connecting point, right? You will not think that you are from Dehradun or you're from Noida or you're from here. You are an Indian at heart and you are going to be, for that cause, right? So that is what the connections are all about. So from that analogy, I feel that if we kind of think of everybody in your city as a part of your own family or as a part of your own consciousness, I would say, then only can you actually go and address the issues of these people. Otherwise, it will never really happen. We'll always only kind of get into the iconic, get into the realm of those beautiful designs, beautiful things. Those are the comfort zones that we like to get into. So if we don't walk out from our comfort zones and into their houses, into their lives to see the trophy. I mean, I've been doing GSEN for the last 3-4 years. And the first GSEN, this was one of the idea of the conductomes, where the rationale was put out as to why we should do something within the realm of the people who are, from the, as they call it, a technical term for that is bottom of the pyramid, BOP. It's called BOP. Go and connect with the people. Connection with the people is very important because until now, the needs and the programs that we define for ourselves are basically our own programs. You go and you want to design a library, but we have never really thought how the other person, who is probably not an architect, would like to experience a library. Has anybody done that kind of research over here? We don't do actually, as to how many people really do we go to. We are doing all our research, like somebody said, from here, from the net. And that is a completely secondary research. A primary research, even if you go and go to a library, a physical library, you really don't ask the people or interview people to ask them, okay fine, this is a library, what is the kind of space that you would want to read? Do you want any other kind of spaces? Nobody asks these questions. Because it's not a kind of a tenet in your educational systems. But unless we go and ask the people as to how do you want to use this library, what would you do to improve the experience of this library? The answer to that question we don't have. The answer to that question will only come once we interview 10, 20, 30, 50 people who use the library regularly. And from that, we have to convert what is known as a tangible reference, which is over here. So, is the idea of a tangible reference clear now?
Yes.
And then you use that reference to create a program. So, program can only be created after you have connected with the people. The program is incomplete if you do it from the net, or it's incomplete if you do it from some kind of a morphological study, or you do it from some kind of a study of the human being, that a human being requires so much space, to read, to walk, and all those kind of things. Those anthropometric studies are very important, no doubt, because without that you cannot. But those are givens. Those are givens because you will not be able to design a space for 100 people. You won't know what the size of the hall required if you don't know the anthropometrics properly. But over here, what I'm trying to raise a question to is that do we really connect to the people to ask them what kind of a space do they want? I don't think we've done it because we take it for granted. We take it for granted that the library has to have this kind of a space. We take it completely for granted. I mean, how do you know? I mean, maybe people would want only single pods to go and go in a nature park and be a library. From a central reserve, you pick up the books, or even now you can just go and read a Kindle somewhere. So how do we know? We base our entire choice of spaces only on buildings which have already been constructed and to which we have a a certain affinity, whether it is an iconic affinity because the building has a great shape, it has a great value in terms of its aesthetics, materials. So the point over here to make is that people connectivity and understanding people's sensibilities, their needs, is very, very important. And mainly through GSEN trophies, we have been trying to guide the students or trying to at least engage them with proper research methodology. Okay? Because doing research from the net is not a methodology, according to me. It is too much of a comfort level. You wanted to ask something?
Yes, so what I get from connecting with people is via surveys. We can ask a bunch of people what they want for the library, but I was not able to understand how to convert it into a tangible reference. Like we take a survey from 10 people, someone is saying that we need more bookshelves, and someone is saying we need a cafeteria next to our library, someone is saying we need a library facing north, like that. So how should we convert those different ideas into one tangible reference?
Yeah. What we'll do is, we'll run through the whole presentation, because otherwise it will go beyond the time limit of the GSEN. So one of the main considerations for this presentation is also to give a kind of overview on the current GSEN trophy brief also. So I'll answer your questions, but we'll do that a little later. We will get into the tangible reference, and I will have your answer. I know what to answer for that. Only thing is that we'll do it a little later. So the conclusion is that every age defines a new need. Okay? Now for 100 years we have been looking at certain buildings which have been created by people of great repute, good architects. Michelangelo, this and the other, and then Bauhaus came in, and then a great revolution happened in design, and then modernism came in, and Le Corbusier came in, and Frank Lloyd Wright came in, and after Frank Lloyd Wright now it's Frank Gehry, so the Frank name continues, and then there are a lot of people. So those are our only sources of some kind of inspiration, should we say. They are really great inspirers. But if we are just inspired by that and kind of blindly follow those kind of precepts and only change certain factors for us without understanding how to put the people or the people's need before us, that becomes, you can write down all your questions, whatever it is, I'll answer the questions later on. So, all I'm saying is right now that architecture students need to recreate their identity and their orientation. Because if the students don't do it, who else will? You need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it. You need to have a lot of questions ready for your faculty members, and if they can't answer, of course, there are two things which the students get hooked to. One is marks, and the other is attendance. So problem to ho jayega. It will be a difficult situation for you to challenge somebody. But unless and until you start bringing in this culture of critique and culture of trying to question the norm, you must question the norm. So before you start taking on any design, whatever it is, you have to understand why are you doing it in the first place? For whom are you doing it? Where are you doing it? Only then the how will come about. Not before you have answered the earlier three questions. So that is why it's important to get the connectivity with the people. And you guys have to create your own identity. Nobody is going to, otherwise you will always start wearing a Rem Koolhaas shirt, a Frank Lloyd Wright shirt, or any of these architect shirts. You will become a Zahadi. And your buildings will also wear those same clothes. So all I'm saying is get real and get innovative. There are plenty of examples also on the net which are very, very relevant to their situations, and you can source that as well. So you have to bring yourself into the new world by these new created your new identities. The basic thing is that you have to know your city. There is no going away from the fact that your city is something which is different from you are. You are only one part of your city, and knowing your city is extremely important from that point of view. So then we are creating something called a new urbanism, because the moment you deal with the city, there is an urban character to it. And there is a huge number of people who are flocking into the city. They could be migrationary, they could be temporary migrationary, they could be permanent people who come and live in slums and all those things. But there is no condition which is kind of defining that whole thing. And therefore your whole city becomes a social space for you to study. It becomes a lab actually. And if you go down as scientists into the city to understand what your city is all about, I think that is absolutely fantastic. You'll come up with very, very brilliant reviews of the city. So the platform that we have got over here, luckily, is that of NASA, which is a co-curricular force, which is why we are trying to get these ideas into the students' mind and trying to engage them to see if they can reach a different kind of a level, a different kind of an awareness for themselves, a different kind of a reality than what is projected. Right now, we all live within our own dreams. We all live within our own realities. And those realities are extremely, extremely small. We need to get out of those realities, and we need to actually go and embrace the city. We need to see what is happening in the city and see what kind of things we can do with them. So the intent drives content, and the initiatives we have taken is, one thing is the GSEN trophy, and I also had an organization called Investigating Design, where we do a lot of workshops with small children regarding design, but we'll talk about that some other time. So the main thing, the topic of interest over here is engagement with the urban poor. And from the Connectome story, you probably might have understood that it's all about the empathy that you feel. Empathy, see, there are two words. One is empathy and one is sympathy. Sympathy, you'll obviously feel for the slum people. You'll obviously feel, that they are living in such conditions. Oh my God, look at that, so terrible. They have no food to eat. Look at the children. They are so sick, so unhealthy. That is sympathy. But sympathy doesn't work. Sympathy is not going to do anything for them at all. You'll probably cry 2 tears if the situation is really bad. But that's it. So the next plank is empathy. Empathy means you go there with the will to do something for them. And the only way to do something for them is to find out something about them. There is no situation where you can always go and enforce whatever you feel onto them. And they are poor guys, they'll accept it also. But empathy means it is not about yourself, but it is about the other. And if you expect that person to be an Indian, it's very difficult. You are an Indian, and you have a certain image of yourselves as Indians, and you never bring that beggar on the street as an Indian. You'll never think of him as an Indian. You'll kind of, they're always in a completely different compartment as far as we are concerned. So empathy is the basic code from which you need to start if you want to go on this. And it's not compulsory. I mean, most of you can easily kind of bypass all this kind of thing. But there are students of architecture who are genuinely interested in this kind of thing. When I've seen over the last 3 years, the whole idea has been picking up, and people are quite interested in doing something in this region. The moment you finish your 5th year, you guys are going to get locked up in some office for 2 years. Some of you might even start your own practice. And after those 2 years, you can again go somewhere else, do your master's, this, that. So you will not have another opportunity like this to engage with a subject of this nature. That is for sure. So opportunity over here has to be taken quickly and grabbed. Now let's come to the the theme of the current NASA GSEN. So the basic theme is parallel projections. So parallel projections basically comes from the idea of orthographic projections. It means you have plans, sections, elevations, which are not a reality, but obviously they need to be there so that you can construct a building. And then in the 3Ds there are the axonometrics and isometrics and all that. So basically parallel projections remains within that kind of a boundary. But over here, what we are trying to do is trying to see if parallel projections as an idea can be used to develop a design or kind of engage with the urban poor. And how do we do it? So in that, since we know that architecture is a multi-layered process and every layer has its own significance. For instance, there's a layer of climate, there's a layer of actual geography, there's a layer of people, which we all miss out, but it's there. There is a layer of materials, there is a layer of technology, there is a layer of time, there is a layer of economics, because that also matters. So there are several layers through which the architectural process actually goes. So it's like what your entire conclusion is going to be is going to go through so many sieves. Sieves matlab channi. It goes through so many of these sieves. And every layer can be imagined as a parallel projection. Because that parallel projection, even you guys must be showing those exploded views of a building, ground floor, first floor, this, that, So those are also parallel projections. That is only of one building, but there are several layers which can also be, a climatic layer can be put, so many other layers can be also put. So those are parallel projections. There is a second meaning of parallel projections. Now, my contention over here, where we kind of go away from that typical explanation of parallel projection, is that between every parallel projection, there is a space. If there is no space between two parallel lines, the two parallel lines cannot exist. Is that right? And let me hear a yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So that's understood, right? If there is no space, there are no parallel lines. So the idea over here is that to explore this space, so what do we call this space? This space is called a threshold. Because when you come to a certain line or to a certain plane, it is very clear what that plane is about. When you go to the other plane, again it is very clear. But the space in between is nebulous. It does not have a kind of a definition. And because it does not have a kind of definition, it is also a space of great creativity. This is the imagination. This is the idea that I'm putting it forward to all of you. So we need to explore this space. And this has come entirely from the thematics of parallel projections. Now this is a part which is already there in the brief. So I'm just going to read it out to you. So the idea of a threshold is extremely fragile and potent at the same time. The threshold is a nebulous area, which is why it is the birthplace of creativity. It is the dawn and dusk periods of the day. Because the day has a day and night. And between every day and night there will be a dawn and dusk. So dawn and dusk are the thresholds between two clear areas. It is the present between the past and the future. And if you actually see the idea of the present, the past and the future. So the past is very clear to everybody because it has already happened. There's no two ways about it. There's nothing that can change it also. About the future, you can only imagine because it has not happened yet. It's the present which is actually going to, kind of create a new future for yourselves. So the present is your threshold, and this is your space of creativity. Okay, so these are various ideas which kind of connect to each other to have some kind of an excitement when you deal with your problem, when you deal with your GSEN brief. Similarly, It is youth, which is between childhood and adulthood, which is also a threshold. Okay, so youth is something which I have kind of made it big over here because that is a catchword. Because what you have to do is with youth, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. There are some earlier themes of NASA from where the parallel lines come. The parallel projections have been taken from those NASA themes. Okay? So that is something which you have to also be careful about. So one was contextuality, which was in 2013-14, and transformation, which was in 14-15. Those are the themes of NASA. And the participants over here in this particular program, this 2016 NASA, they are asked to find the threshold between these two themes. Okay, so theme is taken as a parallel projection because it happens at a certain time, year after year. So that's a parallel plane. It's a plane in time. Okay, so you have to find out the threshold between these two themes. Then they have to define and elaborate it after having fully explored all the possibilities of what a threshold is. And every description or idea of threshold will be definitely unique because it will be unique to your own college or to your own team who is getting into the GSEN program. Then after having explored all the possibilities, you can use this as a lens to accomplish tasks after the brief while keeping gender sensitivity as a focus. GSEN, I believe, actually is a short form for the gender sensitivity. And mostly all GSEN themes would have at least one element of gender sensitivity into this whole thing. So in the particular thing which was in 2013-14 contextuality, the idea was that there are connectomes, which I already explained to you. Then there's another theme of self-similarity and democracy, which were kind of tied up in that particular theme of contextuality. So we'll go to what is known as self-similarity. So self-similarity is basically, you will find it in nature. It is also a mathematical precept and a concept, wherein every small part in nature actually is creates itself to be a bigger part of it. So when one changes the scales, you can find this thing more in the visual, where over here you can see the leaves and the tree, and even the smallest part of the leaf, they all look very similar. So these are the building blocks of nature actually. So nature builds from the smallest to the highest. But the overall shape of the tree, the overall shape of the leaf, they all look very similar. And then you have something which is a kind of a fossilized stone, which is shown over here. And the fossilized stone also has a pattern which looks like a tree. So this is again a part of self-similarity. And if you look at the detail of a leaf, you'll also find a similar kind of a pattern, because that's where the nutrients flow to from all the parts. You probably also have something to do with the brain. This is from the sky, an aerial view of the mountains, and this also looks like a crumpled leaf. So the whole idea of self-similarity has been kind of put out over here, that you have to look into this particular thing in nature. So it's not only about the urban poor, because if it's only about the urban poor, maybe the whole discussion and whole dialogue can become very depressing. So to create a kind of a diversion, so that because architects are used to ideas and trying to relate ideas in many ways, this is a method which I am using to get you to see this. The other concept is democracy, which is a very difficult concept to actually show. There is equality in which somebody does not get enough view. Then there is equity, where it's absolutely fine, and the reality is very different. So these are the realities which I'm asking you to find out. go there and find out what the realities are. Because that was also part of the GSEN brief. The second theme from which you have to take certain references is of transformation. And over here also there was something called evidence-based design. You know, evidence-based design is a very important aspect of trying to find out from the people. That's the only way you will actually connect. Because you have to go to the people, you have to find out what it is that they need, what are their actual requirements in terms of whatever design you want to come up with. So evidence-based design is always be better than any other design which we dream of, thinking that these are our needs. And then there is gender sensitivity, which is basically safety for women in public spaces, the idea of the commons, and through that evidence-based design and the concepts of gender sensitivity, we have something called placemaking, which was also done in this theme of transformation. So in transformation, the students are asked to actually go out into these localities, find out a particular space where women feel unsafe, and then to go to those places and figure out what is it that makes the women unsafe. So first of all, you have to interview the women over there, you have to interview the men over there, and try to figure out with them how can we make this place safe. That is what empathy is all about. You were asking about how to make it into a this thing, right? So when you interview, you actually get a lot of data, but when you interview, you will have to go with a kind of a formed questionnaire. The questionnaire will have to be there as to what questions you are asking, because only then will you get equivalent answers. You can't just go and ask any question. So let us say you go and ask a set of 10 questions. You will get answers for that particular question. So you have to be in that particular specific mode of research. Okay, it's a different mode of research. So the 2014 NASA of the transformation was to design ideas for public spaces. And coming back to parallel projections, we will take only these two ideas. One is self-similarity and one is gender sensitivity. And we will consider these to be two parallel lines. And we have to explore the threshold between these two concepts. So even though the study is about real people, even though the study is based heavily on going out there into the slums, trying to find out what their needs would be, the kind of ideas that you will have to come up with are based on these two lenses only. One is self-similarity and the other one is gender sensitivity. These are the two strong things. But what would be the threshold between these two is something in design that you have to define. I don't know if it is clear to you guys or not, but that's the way we are trying to. So the threshold is very, very important. The design basically which has been asked is, there are a lot of questions like who, why, what, where. So for whom should it be? It should be for the youth. I am thinking particularly because all of you are in that threshold space which is youth. And if you can go out there into these slum localities and connect with people of your age, I'm sure there will be a lot of problems in that, because the way those guys have been, the conditions that they have been subjected to, most probably they might be criminal even. I don't know. They could be depressed, they could be drug addicts, I don't know, they could be anything. But unless you go out over there, there is nothing you can really do. Others you can remain in the space of designing a thing. So youth is the threshold, so it is threshold between the childhood and adulthood, as already said. So why? Because the participants over here who will be taking part in this GSEN competition are necessarily from this category. They are all youth. So what is to be done? We have to do a center for youth. So the design problem is center for youth. Now there are no case studies for this. There cannot be. Because unless and until you go down to those communities, unless and until you go and check up what are they doing right now, and what is it that would best channel their energies, you will not be able to come up with anything. So there is no case study in this whole program. Because you will only have case studies of things which have already happened. And those will be merely buildings. There will be some space somewhere for some sports center or this or that or something like that to channel their energy. But it's not going to be real. It is somebody's idea of what they should do. But the idea over here is to go out there into the communities and check out with them as to what they need. It's very easy. The government says that they need employment. But I'm not very sure whether they really need employment. There could be other things which their needs are. So when we come back to the question that is it really an architect who does all this? But then for that you have to redefine, what an architect really does. Because this is actually quite an exciting opportunity over here that one can get. So what I have mentioned in the brief is that this is not a typology. Because a typology is something which is a standard kind of thing. A church looks like a church, looks like a church. A temple has to look like a temple. It can't be four walls in for a temple. It has to have certain design elements which will make it look like a temple. Or even your libraries or schools or whatever it is. So they have their certain typologies. And this whole word of typology is very boring. Because it makes your design innovation completely redundant. So in this case, I am saying that this is not a typology. This is something which is a center of innovation for you. This is an opportunity for creating something based on what the actual need in the community is going to be. So it's going to be different in various places. There are no areas given. There are no parameters given. Because I cannot imagine what would be the needs. It's for you to go and find out. So unless you find out, you will not be able to go to the next stage. The other thing which I have done in this particular GSEN is I have found that even in the last 3 GSENs, people come up with huge amount of 3Ds, colorful, zahadi type of stuff. So the urban poor, kya karega? There's no affordability, there is nothing, people. But, they are driven by that whole internet looking for ideas, sourcing the ideas from here and there and kind of applying it. So this time I have said that the presentations will not be in color at all. Everything is going to be in black and white. That will probably kill a lot of people over here. But I think that's the only way that we can actually get to some good content. Because what is most important is I don't mind the whole presentation to be purely in sketches. Purely in sketches. But there has to be a great amount of research in terms of actually going over there to the community, finding out from those youth, number of interviews, and there will have to be a film also. The film could be in color, but preferably black and white. The film has to be there because the film will have a lot of interviews of the youth and how you come to that particular design and the design solution. So this is not a regular design problem at all. It is a completely different ball game altogether. It's a completely different animal from your typical typology of doing a library. There could even be a library in the world. I don't know. They might want a library. So that is what this whole thing is all about. And the driving force over here is obviously your process will be there, design process, where what you create because of the empathy, then goes into the research, and then obviously you ideate, and you have a prototype. So there is also a stage of prototype because it's a 3 months program for GSEN, in which the first month you have to do your entire research. The second month you have to go with the same community and try and build something with locally available materials or whatever resources are available. Along with the youth, you build that center. However impermanent it is, however, just for an experiment to see if it works. And I'm sure you'll get a lot of help if you go out there. Or maybe you won't get any help, but you have to generate your own help. And again, those are factors which architects or even students are not really used to dealing with. But those will be exciting because then you will be actually thrown into the real world to see what it's all about. And I don't know whether you have the opportunity to test out all those things, but that's a part of the program. So one very, very different aspect which we generally don't do is we do the identifying, we do the participate, we do the design of the build, but we never look really at the sustainability of the building. We never do. Building bana diya, khatam ho gaya, aage chal gaye. So that's another aspect which you should just a slide. Now we can have our questions and answers, if there are any. See, there will be a lot of questions, I think, if you guys address this issue. But if there are anything in which you have not understood any particular element in this, is something which I want to answer it currently. There might be a disconnect somewhere, perhaps, that you are unable to connect A to B or B to C, so that I can answer it currently in this whole thing.
Problem?
Construction.
Any building or anything?
No, not really, not really. Not really at all. You can have your own means of unconstructing.
Like, is there any building in India which is gender sensitive? Example?
The people have to be, no? The people have to be gender sensitive.
Okay.
And there has to be that awareness also. I don't know any particular thing. It's not, gender sensitivity is a very different aspect when you go to the slums or when you go to what do you call, when you go to the informal sector. What happens is the government comes and builds let us say urinals for the males, but they build it absolutely where a lot of women folk are going for their work every day. It's a nasty business, Where there are urinals, there are kind of certain elements who come and try to be very nasty with the women. So then your role would be to find out how to overturn that design, what is already existing, and make it safe for the women. And that would be a challenge. I don't know what you would do, but definitely you would shield that particular space. If you start thinking about how do you kind of be sensitive to the women, you shield that space from where the women are going. So maybe you create some kind of interventions over there itself, which will lead to a rerouting of the people going from here to there. Does that answer your question? No? It does. There is no such building which is a gender sensitive building. That's what I think. There will be no building which is either gender sensitive or not gender sensitive or something like that. There are situations which are created in public spaces where gender sensitivity becomes a problem. In buses, for instance, I'm sure a lot of girls do travel in buses. And I have heard really horrific stories about the crowds in the bus and how they are treated. But anyways, we are not dealing with that kind of a gender sensitivity. We are dealing with gender sensitivity in public spaces. And public spaces, the moment you land outside your house, it's a public space. But your idea of house, my idea of house, and their idea of house is entirely different. Because they might just have a 10 feet by 10 feet room to live in, where 20 people are living. So the whole idea is to go there and get some kind of reality check as to how can we connect with these people and how can we, create some interventions by which their everyday life can become much better. It can give a solution to their problems in some way. And this does not need to be a full-time occupation as architects. It can be just a very small part. You could possibly spend one day a week to do this. But again, it's a question of addressing the thing. Well, I frankly feel that it is within the purview of architects to address this issue. Because planners, they have kind of, created some dimensions, and you might be shocked to know that the dimensions which they have created for these people from the slums, whom they relocate on the peripheries of the city, the dimensions for each house is 10 feet by 12.5 feet. So in Delhi particularly, there are two areas called Savra, Gerwa and Bhavana. So if you want to have reality check, you can go to those places and check them out. They have no planning sense at all. The slum is better planned than that. The other thing is about toilets, in these places. They have common toilets for maybe 50 units or something like that. Now, in the climate of Delhi, small children, old ladies, old people, how will they walk from their house to the toilets? It's damn tough. In Bombay, it's possible at least. And there are political layers also in this, parallel projections. Political things where I've been to this locality, Bhavana, once, and I realized that there is a toilet, very good toilet, ready, but it's locked. And why is it locked? Because the local MLA has not had the time to come there to open it with a ribbon, and lying around for 3 months, 4 months, ready to be used. And so people are using the space outside the toilet and making it. What else they do? So these are reality checks which you need to take. But if you take it in the positive sense of empathy, then you would want to do something about it. So that's it. I think I can end my talk now. Any more questions, please? No? So it's okay?
Yes, yes.
Endgame?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you Thanks to you for sticking around for such a long time.
Thank you, sir.